Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So, this article came out, and there have been many articles, so they won't let it rest. Nipsey Hussle was not so much a hero in the eyes of California officials, of course. And we knew this was going to come out, of course. So, it's not a surprise. At least it wasn't to me. And so, I'm going to go into this. Um, this article says Nipsey Hussle was hailed as a hero, but to California officials, he's still and still always will be in their eyes a gangster. And so it goes on to say in Los Angeles, when the gunman rolled up to Nipsey Hussle's Marathon clothing store late last month, the first person to be shot was Kerry Lathan, recently released from prison and there to pick up a t-shirt rather. So Mr. Lathan was shot in the back before Hussle, the renowned rap artist, was killed. So days later, Mr. Lathan, using a wheelchair while he recovered from his wound, was arrested and held in a men's central jail. And not because he had committed a crime, but because he had violated his parole by associating with a known gang member, and that being Nipsey Hussle. So never mind that Hussle had been lauded as a businessman and a philanthropist, mourned with a 25-mile procession through the street of South LA and celebrated by former President Barack Obama, or that he had been killed one day before he was set to sit down with the city police chief to talk about reducing gang violence. Mr. Lathan's re-imprisonment stirred outrage in the city's black community, where memories of aggressive gang policing in the 1980s and 1990s are still raw. And I lived here during that time, so I know what that whole story was about as well. So it also brought renewed attention to a system of parole and probation that can land people back behind bars for violating lengthy sets of conditions that can include curfews, random searches, and control over where people can live and whom they can see. So after Mr. Lathan, 56 years of age, spent 10 days in jail, apparently even parole officials could no longer reconcile Nipsey Hussle, the local hero, with Nipsey Hussle, the gang member. So on Thursday, after appeals to the government, Gavin Newsom, by family members and calls to the governor's office by reporters, the head of the state corrections department, Ralph M. Diaz, intervened and the charges against Mr. Lathan were dropped. More than 4.5 million people in the U.S. are on parole or probation right now, nearly twice as many as are incarcerated, and in some states, people whose parole or probation was revoked account for more than half the prison population. So, according to a study by the Pew's Charitable Trust, about 20% of parole released in state prisons are sent back for technical violations, meaning they did not commit a new crime, but rather violated conditions like a ban on entering places that serve alcohol or having any contact with the police, or in the protracted case of the rapper Meek Mill, in order to take etiquette classes. And so this is the marathon store right here, and it's a memorial for Nipsey Hussle right here. His clothing store, right outside in Los Angeles of South LA, has long maintained a database of suspected gang members, and apparently Hussle was still listed as well, despite the turn in his life. So critics say that probation and parole often go on far longer than necessary and keep people enmeshed in the criminal system, or justice system, rather, and that those accused of violations have limited due process. So California, once a leader in get tough on crime policies that swelled prison populations, is now seen as a forefront of national efforts to address mass incarceration and racial disparities in the criminal justice system. So in recent years, The state has reduced some drug crimes and thefts to misdemeanors, passed a bill to outlaw cash bail, and allow more inmates to be released for good behavior instead. So, but many parole violations, however, involve alleged links to gang members. So, gangs are the great exception to the trend away from incarceration, said Georgia Leap. If I'm pronouncing it wrong, sorry for that. So it goes on to say that a gang expert, she is this person, or Horha Leap. I might be saying it, it might be said that way. It's an expert. So he or she at the University of California of Los Angeles, even with significant questions about how gangs and gang membership and gang related crimes are defined. Such crimes carry enhanced punishments, and a person tagged as having gang affiliations can find the label impossible to shake. So, if someone like Nipsey Hussle is viewed as an always a gang member, Dr. Leap said, "What is happening to the average guy who has a low level job, who's trying to make it, and that's his past?" So, or the average gal, because it's men's and women's alike, okay? So, this is a related video. It's Nipsey Hussle's friend recalls the last moments after the shooting. And so, I'm not going to play that because I'm sure some people have seen it. If you haven't, you can look at it on your own time. So, it goes on to read that California has long maintained a database of gang members called Cal Gang. And if you click here on this article, it'll show you a list of them. And apparently, Hussle, who had been spoken publicly about his past experience as a member of the Crips, was still listed despite the turn of his life. The arresting document for Mr. Lathan called Hussle a documented Rolling 60s Crip gang member. So the database, which is available only to law enforcement, has long been seen in the minority communities as a way for the state to criminalize young Black and Latino men with little oversight or due process. So the database has also academics and activists that say made it nearly impossible for those on parole to avoid contact with gang members because so many names on the list and no one really knows who. So it's really wrong to be permanently putting people on these lists, said Vincent Schiraldi, an expert on probation at Columbia University. So it's very racially divisive. And you heard that now, it's racially divisive. It makes people in communities of color feel like that they have a chance to be viewed, that they never have a chance to be viewed as equals. So Mr. Lathan was released last September for serving a 25-year stint on a murder conviction. And like countless men coming out of prison whom Hussle was trying to help, he was loosely in the rapper's orbit. So Hussle had known his sister, Elisa McKnight, and had given her a car full of clothes and her brother when he was released. But Mr. Lathan barely knew Hussle, even though he had hopes of working with him in his programs to reduce the gang violence. So at the time of his death, he was an icon of the community, and Miss McKnight said of Hussle, that's who he was. So the whole city shut down to mourn this man, and even Congress recognized him. So how is it that Mr. Lathan was going to have a meeting with a person affiliated with a gang? Okay, so that's the way they made it look because of him having former affiliations with the gang. So Mr. Lathan, in recent interview from jail that was recorded by a friend, had uploaded to Vlad TV, said that he had taken a selfie with Hussle. So he's a celebrity, and he said that, and everybody's taking selfies. Let me take one too. So that's on my phone in front of the Marathon store. So Mr. Lathan, who said he was feeling bad as hell without his pain medication, related his conversation with the parole officer at the time of his arrest. The parole officer was like, "Well, you have gang affiliations." I said, "Look, man, I know Nipsey about as much as I know you. You're my parole officer, and I've met you, and we've talked a few times, and that's as far as I know him." In a statement, the Los Angeles Police Department trying to blunt criticism and put down rumors in the city's black community that the police were behind Mr. Lathan's arrest, said this week that Mr. Lathan was being treated as a victim and a witness in this investigation. So the statement noted that it was the California Department of Corrections that had arrested Mr. Lathan. A spokesman with that department did not respond to the request for the comment. So Steve Sorborough, the president of Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners, who was planning to meet with Hussle to talk about combating gang violence, said in the interview, "We don't think that he's a gang member. If someone said, 'Could Nipsey babysit my grandkids?' I'd say yes." So Mr. Lathan had turned his life around in prison by participating in numerous programs like working closely with older inmates, his lawyer, and Lauren Norwegia, or Noega. I mispronounced that because the names are different. So excuse me for that. So this area of the law is so flawed, said Miss Norega, of parole policies and gang databases, it doesn't make any sense. So it doesn't give these guys or women any chance to prove that they have been rehabilitated and actually get a second chance. So even as a gang expert who has testified in court, Dr. Leap said that she had no access to the Cal Gang database herself. Law enforcement controls it. And here's the critical thing: no one ever makes it off that list. No one. So on April 9th, Mr. Lathan sat in jail for associating himself with Nipsey Hussle. The city renamed a street intersection in Hussle's honor. So that's basically the article right there. So that should pretty much tell you how that whole thing went. So once you're in a gang, y'all, you're always in it, in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of the officials in the community, even if you're hailed a hero, as Nipsey Hussle was and is. And what I wanted to say is that outside of addition to this, I thought this was a fitting article, and I'm going to leave it right here. I thought this was a fitting article because I wanted to say, and I know that some people might not want to hear this, but not everybody is trying to do the right thing, unfortunately. And then you have some people who are trying to do the right thing. Maybe they had a past and they made some wrongs. They made many wrongs, and they get older, they mature, they start taking life more serious, and they decide to correct their wrongs. However, everybody is not at that same place in life. They don't mature as fast, or they don't learn from their mistakes, or they keep making the same mistakes over and over again. And so that is the issue that I feel that is not just in South LA or in just certain cultures, but what I do know being it so that, being more, I would say, more familiarized with Black culture is that sometimes people will attribute things from an experience, and then they see a person that rises from poverty or rises from being labeled, or they're fighting against a system that has always been, it seems, or as though it's against them, especially after what we read in the article. um, they hail them a hero, or they see them like a Scarface type character. You made it out, but there's always this horrible ending, just like in the movie Scarface. He ended up succumbing to the demise of his own business, which was a bad thing. You know, coming from poverty, coming out of poverty, and becoming this big time successful drug dealer, but still he's always going to be that drug dealer, and he's doing something good for some people and horrible for a lot. And in the eyes of the law, he's looked at as that gangster. And, in the eyes of poor people who don't have anything and don't have a voice, he might be looked or viewed as somewhat of a hero or a street hero. So that's the thing. It's like, what I dislike, I will say, is the fact that people are not really looking at the accomplishments that this Nipsey Hussle guy made over the course of his life, that he matured in his life and that he got involved with activism and entrepreneurialism, and he was trying to correct all of his wrongs. Well, basically, by doing the right things, he saw a greater picture, and he corrected it in that way, in that sense, to say, okay, this is who I really am. These are the wise things that I know, and this is what I want to do for myself, my family, and community. Most of the young people are focused on the crip and the gang banging and hanging out and doing all of the wrong things. They're not really focused on owning things and entrepreneurship and how to get out of situations where you stay out of the radar. And some situations you'll never really constantly be out of the radar because once you get involved with activities such as gang life, or if you get involved with being a drug dealer, the police, law enforcement put you on, like they say, this list. If they have your mugshot and that's what you've been listed as in the eyes of law enforcement, that's what you'll always be. It it's sad, but it's true. And so that might be another contributor as to why some people will get pulled over a lot more often because of something that they've been affiliated with or associated with that deems them as this dangerous character. And they don't look at the person's intent on the insides. Like the article was saying, the person may have rehabilitated themselves, they may have worked through some of their issues, and they decide to take a turn in life where they take a turn for the better, not for the worse. Unfortunately, they meet some type of demise. They have trouble finding employment. And Hustle was working on that, trying to figure out how we can get people back in the workforce by other means. Um, and it seems as though that what I have a problem with is when you have people that glorify the gang life, when you have people who have had those experiences, who have been fighting to do so much to correct their misdeeds by doing the right things, or they mature in life, they have family, they have kids, they have a long life that they would wish to succeed with and be successful, and then they decide to take life serious, and then that's when they realize, oh, I've got felonies, or I can't work here, or I can't live in this neighborhood, or I can't, a lot of limitations and more obstacles that make it harder for people to thrive. And so, like they say in the article, what do you do about a person that's just the average Joe? They're not famous. Not everybody can be Nipsey Hussle, right? And so that's the thing. These young people are really impressionable. When they had the procession, there were a lot of young people. They were jumping on cars. They were excited. There were a lot of people wearing the different colors. I lived in the in Inglewood in the early '80s, and I saw the rock houses. I saw the crack houses. I saw the drug dealers. I saw the Crips and the Bloods. I saw the shooting. I saw death. I saw a lot of that. That's not something, sorry, folks, don't mean to burst your bubble, but that ain't something to be excited and glorified. If you didn't live through that, that's nothing to get on a car and jump around and dance over. And I'm just being real with it. And I'm black, yeah. I lived through that. I know what it was like. I know what it's like having a parent that ended up on crack cocaine, lost the job of many years, and ended up on Skid Row. So I know what that feels like. And so until you walk in the shoes of a person that actually experienced watching people get gunned down in the street, bullets in the head, then that ain't nothing to get on a car and jump around and dance around and parade about. Because they're fighting because you're wearing the wrong color. You get robbed because you're wearing the wrong color. You're not in the right neighborhood, so you get gunned down because you happen to look like somebody that they don't like, and innocent lives are taken, family members are taken, people who You're not even affiliated in a gang, but because you go to a school with people who were in a gang and you happen to know a couple of people, you get jumped on, or either you get hurt, or you have to hurry up and walk home, hurry up and come in the house. There's also a curfew for people that live in those neighborhoods because you know not to be out at a certain time at night because that's when the riffraff goes on. Riffraff, like gangster shootings, people getting hurt, gunned down, somebody could run up on you, drive-bys. I lived through that. That's not something to be celebrated. And if you don't like what I'm saying, then get out of here because I'm not going to lie about it because it was very horrifying. Hearing helicopters, police choppers over your building, and then being told as a kid when you once could play outside, now you have to come in before the street lights are on because, and even before, because you don't know if somebody's going to get shot around the corner or next door or in your building or in the back alley, or you hear somebody getting mugged or raped or beaten by the police. And so, yeah, there were a lot of things going on back then. And so those were like the wild, wild west days is what we call them. People that lived through that. So we're survivors too. Wasn't the Holocaust, but it sure did feel like we were going through something over there in those neighborhoods. It was horrifying to see people always in fear, not knowing when it was going to be your day or your last day, rather. And so I'm just saying that because there was a lot of death, a lot of murder, a lot of mayhem back in that time. And I see that uptick coming back now in South LA. And so, what I'm saying to you is, young people, like I said in another article before I read about his grandmother, she said, live your best life. I believe she meant that in a way not to glorify the gang side of things. She meant live your best life to stay out of trouble and stay out of the radar, stay out of negativity. Try to do the right things. Try to turn around and correct the wrongs. To do things that are positive that benefit you from the long run. Because one day you're not going to want to do what you did when you were in your 20s. I know you think it's cute and you're having fun now, but it ain't cute when you're like 40 and 50 years old and you can't find a place to stay simply because of what you did when you were in your 20s. So I just thought I would make you think about that part of it. Then, when you have kids and you want to see them live and survive, and your name is attached to something negative, and then innocent people that are close to you get killed, all because of something that you did 10, 20 years ago. And so, these are things right here that young people don't really think about because they hadn't had that talk. Maybe they didn't have positive influences in their life, and the only influences that they do have is street credibility, people that have come from poverty and made it to something. As they say, you were nothing and you made it to something. Well, there's other ways to get out there and be successful in life without getting yourself in trouble with the law and with gangs. And I know some people don't want to hear that. Gangs seem to be fashionable right now. I would implore to you, don't get involved because, like this article says, you never live it down. Want me to go back over it? In the eyes of law officials, what does it say? It says, even as a gang expert who has testified in court, Dr. Leap said that she had no access to the gang count database. And so law enforcement controls that database. It controls it. And here's the critical thing, no one ever makes it off that list. No one. So on April 9th, as Mr. Lathan sat in jail for associating with Nipsey Hussle, the city renamed a street intersection in his honor. But even with that, they still look at Nipsey Hussle in the eyes of law enforcement as a gangster. And so that's what he was working so hard to show, that despite what they saw, that he had a heart and he was trying to do the right things. But that's the problem. You know, a lot of these people, these young people, are so impressionable and they don't realize that, if you didn't mess yourself up, then don't start now. So let that be a something, at least, some knowledge of some sort. So this comes from the New York Times. Nipsey Hussle was hailed a hero, but however, to California officials, he was still a gangster. So this is by Tim Arango. It was written 23 hours ago, to be exact. And so, with that being said, I just think people should really be more aware about what they're rooting for and what they're trying to succeed in life for. We need more young people to not get shot and not get killed. More minds like Nipsey Hussle of entrepreneurship and activism, but to stay out of the radar and not get involved in gang activity. I know some of you guys think that's cute, but it isn't cute to see young minds being gunned down in the street and people who could have made a difference and could have done a lot more for the community if they had still been living. And so let's try to see more young people actually survive and help pull each other up by the bootstraps, work together instead of having to deal with killing and more death and more funerals and more dismay and despair. Let's work to pull ourselves up in that sense, and survive and live to see another day. Let's live longer and have more fuller lives and actually carry out our missions that we aspire to do. Let's not glorify killing and murder and death. That's what got us in this situation in the first place. That's the reason why you see a lot of people, those people you see hanging on the street corner in front of liquor stores, they had dreams and something happened in their lives. And those dreams seem to be far, far out of reach. And maybe they had something and they lost it all. Maybe some tragedy happened. Maybe several tragedies happened. We would never know. But to glorify people who are in situations where their life expectancy is much shorter than longer, I would say let's not do that. Let's try to do and look at something a little more positive, like living longer, being fathers, raising your kids, staying with your kids, not tearing each other down, actually building communities and becoming owners, becoming activists, self-activists, and to be more proactive in building communities up and not uplifting gang violence and gang culture per se. Yes, that was in the past. Yes, some people can't live that down, but let's try to turn a new leaf and uplift people, not as a gang mentality. So if you don't like that message, then this is not the video for you. I think it's better to see more Black people live and live out their dreams and actually fulfill a long life and a lifestyle of positivity and not death. That's all I'm saying. Thanks for listening.